You are sitting at a table in a gambling house in London in 1762, and it is late, and you have not moved from this chair in something close to 11 hours. Around you, the noise is continuous. The clatter of dice, the scrape of chairs, the particular low murmur of men watching money change hands. And you are in the middle of a run of cards that you do not want to interrupt for any reason, including eating. You are hungry. You have been hungry for several hours. But the moment you stand up from this table, the moment breaks, and the cards may not come back the way they are coming now. And so you have sent a servant to the kitchen with an instruction that is so simple it barely qualifies as a request. Bring me meat, between bread. What comes back is a slice of cold salt beef pressed between two pieces of toasted bread, and you eat it with one hand while the other hand holds your cards. And you do not look at it, and you do not think about it, and within a few weeks, every other man in the gambling houses of London is ordering the same thing by the name of the person sitting in that chair. Your name is John Montague. You are the fourth Earl of Sandwich. And you have just accidentally branded one of the oldest foods in the history of human civilization. So how did humans make the first sandwich? The answer is not romantic, and it has almost nothing to do with an English earl. For most of human existence, the problem the sandwich solves was not a problem anyone had articulated because it was so fundamental it was invisible. Food is often wet, or crumbly, or hot, or awkward to carry. Hands are useful for other things. The gap between those two facts, between the inconvenience of food and the utility of hands, is the entire design space that the sandwich occupies. And humans began filling that design space approximately as soon as they had bread, which is to say, approximately as soon as they had anything worth putting between it. Bread itself is ancient in ways that still surprise researchers. In 2018, a team led by Amaya Arans Otegui at the University of Copenhagen published findings in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences documenting the remains of flatbread baked at a site called Shubaika 1 in northeastern Jordan, dated to around 14,300 years ago, more than 4,000 years before agriculture. Hunter-gatherers were grinding wild cereals, mixing them with water, and cooking the result on hot stones. This was not farming. This was not civilization. This was people who had noticed that cooked grain paste was more portable, more storable, and more calorie-dense than raw grain, and had acted on that observation. The bread came before the farm. Think about that for a moment. The platform that would eventually carry every sandwich ever made existed before the deliberate cultivation of the grain it was made from. For 14,000 years after Shubaika, bread and food have existed simultaneously. The combination did not wait for an English earl to notice it. The threshold that actually matters is not 1762 in a London gambling house. It is somewhere around the 1st century BC, in Jerusalem, in the home of a rabbi whose approach to a religious meal would encode the basic logic of the sandwich into one of the most widely observed food rituals in human history. His name was Hillel the Elder. He was one of the most influential legal scholars in Jewish tradition, a contemporary of Herod the Great, a man whose interpretations of religious law shaped rabbinical Judaism in ways that are still operative today. And every year, at the Passover Seder, Hillel did something that his contemporaries found either radical or obvious depending on their temperament. He took the bitter herbs commanded by the Exodus narrative and the sweet charosé paste, representing the mortar of Egyptian slavery, and the lamb commanded as the Passover sacrifice, and he placed them together between two pieces of matzah, the unleavened flatbread of the holiday, and he ate the whole combination in a single bite. His argument was textual. The commandment said to eat these things together, and together meant together, not sequentially. The physical form was the theological point. The Hillel sandwich, as it has been known for 2,000 years, is still eaten at Passover Seders around the world. It predates the Earl of Sandwich by roughly 18 centuries. It has a name, it has a doctrine, it has a recorded rationale from a named scholar at a specific historical moment. If the sandwich requires a founding father, the application was filed in Jerusalem around 30 BC, not in a London card room in 1762, but even Hillel was not first. Here is the part of the story that the clean origin myth version always skips, because it requires sitting with the uncomfortable fact that most of what we call invention is actually just the latest visible instance of a practice so old and so universal that calling any single moment its origin is essentially a category error. The underlying act, placing one food on top of or inside another food to make a portable, unified eating unit, appears in the archaeological and textual record wherever bread appears, because it is the obvious thing to do with bread. The Egyptian workers who built the temples at Karnak, documented in administrative papyri studied by Egyptologist Juan Carlos Moreno Garcia at the CNRS in Paris, received rations of bread and onions and salted fish. There is no direct textual evidence that they combined these into a unified handheld unit. But the absence of evidence and the evidence of absence are different things, and the combination of bread and protein in a portable worksite context is so structurally logical that the burden of proof runs the other way. Show me the evidence that they kept them separate. Roman soldiers carried hardtack and dried meat on campaign. The encampment kitchens documented at sites like Vindolanda on Hadrian's Wall were the Vindolanda tablets, a collection of thin wooden writing tablets excavated from the 1970s onward by Robin Burley and his colleagues at the Vindolanda Trust, give us extraordinary detail about daily military life. Show soldiers eating bread with cheese, bread with ham, bread with whatever was available, in the context of field rations that were fundamentally about portability and hand consumption. The Roman legionary did not sit down with a plate. He ate while moving, while working, while standing guard, and the thing he ate was bread with something on it or in it, because that is what field food is. In medieval Europe, before forks were common eating implements, and forks did not become standard at European tables until the 17th century. A timeline documented exhaustively by historian B. Wilson in her 2012 book, Consider the Fork. The thick slice of stale bread, called a trencher, served as both plate and base for whatever meat or stew sat on top of it. At the end of the meal, you ate the trencher too, soaked with the juices of everything it had held. The bread was not incidental to the meal. The bread was the infrastructure of the meal. It was the plate and the vehicle and the food simultaneously. The only difference between a trencher and a sandwich is that nobody thought to put a second piece on top, and that difference is so small it barely deserves the word invention. And here is what all of this means, and this is the sentence that reframes the whole story. The sandwich was not invented, it was noticed. Someone, eventually, looked at what humans had been doing with bread and protein for 14,000 years and assigned it a name, and the name is what we remember because names are how humans index the world. The Earl of Sandwich did not create a new food, he created a new word. And the word spread because words spread faster than practices, and once the word existed, the practice it described, which had been continuous and universal and almost entirely undocumented, suddenly had an identity. The sandwich became visible the moment it became nameable. It had existed, unnamed and unremarkable, for as long as bread had existed. We did not invent the sandwich. We invented the word sandwich. The thing itself is as old as hunger and flatbread, which is to say, as old as civilization and then some. And because the same pressure in different places produces the same solution, the bread wrap portable food unit appears independently on every continent that developed grain agriculture, in forms so structurally similar that the convergence is almost comic. In Mexico, the tortilla, a flatbread made from nixtamalized maize, a process documented archaeologically at sites in Oaxaca, dating to around 1400 years ago by researchers, including Kent Flannery at the University of Michigan, was filled with beans, meat, and chili from its earliest recorded uses. The taco is a sandwich. This is not a provocative claim, it is a geometric fact. A filling enclosed or supported by a bread vehicle, designed for hand consumption, optimized for portability. That is the definition, and the taco meets every criterion, as does the burrito, the arepa, the pupusa, and every other filled flatbread in the Mesoamerican and South American traditions. In South and Southeast Asia, roti and paratha have been used as wrapping and scooping vehicles for spiced meat and vegetable fillings for at least 1,000 years, with the specific form varying by region and available ingredients but the underlying logic identical. In China, the bing, a broad category of flatbreads, has been filled with meat and vegetables and folded into portable handheld forms since at least the Han Dynasty, around 2,000 years ago. The jianbing, a filled savory crepe sold from street carts in Chinese cities today, is structurally indistinguishable from what a Roman street food vendor would have recognized as a perfectly normal thing to sell. In the Middle East, the pita and its relatives, documented in ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian baking contexts going back at least 4,000 years, developed the pocket form independently, a bread that creates its own interior cavity for filling, which is arguably a more sophisticated sandwich architecture than two flat slices because it solves the structural integrity problem that every sandwich eventually faces, the filling falling out. The need was universal, the solution kept being rediscovered. Because bread is flat, and food is awkward, and hands are useful, and those three facts have not changed in 14,000 years. Here is the darker thing, the part that gets left out when the sandwich gets celebrated as a monument to convenience and informality and the democratic genius of portable food. The portability of the sandwich has, throughout most of its history, not been a luxury. It has been a marker of labor. The trencher was not the food of someone with leisure. The field ration of the Roman soldier was not a choice. The packed lunch of the 19th century factory worker, the sandwich that entered mass English culture, not from gambling houses, but from the lunchboxes of the industrial working class, documented in the social surveys of researchers like Charles Booth, whose late Victorian poverty studies recorded in meticulous detail what London workers ate and when, was portable because the factory did not stop for you to sit down. The sandwich democratized not leisure, but the act of eating while working. It is the food of people who do not get a break, packaged in a form that fits in one hand because the other hand is occupied. The Earl of Sandwich's version, cold beef between toast, eaten at a card table by a man wealthy enough to gamble for 11 hours, is the anomaly. The norm is the lunch pail, the field ration, the wrapped bundle eaten standing up in a place that is not a dining room. For most of human history, the person eating a sandwich was not a man of leisure who refused to stop playing cards. They were someone who was not permitted to stop working. Both ate the same food. The food did not know the difference. So how did humans make the first sandwich? They made it approximately 14,000 years ago, the moment the first flatbread came off the first hot stone in Jordan, and someone put something on it. They made it in Egypt and Rome and Jerusalem and China and Mexico and the Middle East and South Asia independently without reference to each other. Because the problem the sandwich solves is not cultural, it is ergonomic. It is the problem of carrying food in a hand that is also needed for other things, and it has exactly one solution, which is to put the food inside something that holds itself together. Bread does this. Every culture with bread figured this out. Every culture without bread invented a functional equivalent, the lettuce wrap, the banana leaf, the corn husk, because the underlying need does not care about your specific grain. The Earl of Sandwich named it in 1762. The Earl of Sandwich did not make it. He was 4,000 years late, at minimum, and Hillel the Elder would like a word. Was the convergence inevitable? Given the co-occurrence of bread and portable labor across every grain farming civilization in human history, completely. The only world in which the sandwich is not independently reinvented dozens of times is a world in which bread does not exist, and in that world, you have bigger problems than lunch. Tonight, you may make yourself something to eat, and if you are in a hurry, or if you are standing at the counter, or if you just do not want to do dishes, there is a reasonable chance that what you make will involve two pieces of bread and something between them, and you will do it without thinking, because it is obvious, because it has always been obvious, because 14,000 years of human hunger have made it obvious. You will not think of the Earl of Sandwich, you will not think of Hillel. You will not think of the Roman soldier eating hardtack at a wall in northern England, or the factory worker in 1880s London opening a pail in a room full of machines, or the Egyptian laborer sitting in the shadow of a temple that is not finished yet, eating bread and fish with hands that have been working since before the sun came up. But they are all there, in the gesture. Every one of them. You just picked up what they put down.